So, welcome back to 3rd Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and today we're going to be seeing a siege on a little bit more of an open settlement. So this is a hill fort, which I have actually shown before once, and it definitely looks like the sort of thing that either Rhudaur or the Northern Dunedain would maintain in their struggles in the north, but interestingly enough it's not going to be men that are going to be holding on to what is clearly a human settlement. They seem to have vacated the premises or were driven away by something else, because it's going to be a combination of elves and dwarves that are going to be trying to hold down this rather primitive, by their standards I would imagine, wooden hill fort, and we're going to have the forces of evil on all four sides laying siege to it. It's an interesting little settlement this. There are sort of three lower areas where the wooden wall covers, and then three pathways that go up onto the hill here, where it turns into a bit of a maze to get to the town centre at the top. So it is interesting. It's very defensible, I would say, in spite of the fact that it's a little bit more open, and attacking skirmishers and artillery can be a little bit more dangerous on a more open sort of fortification like this. I would suggest that because of the positioning, the defenders have got every reasonable expectation that they could go on to win this, especially considering the quality of the factions that are on the defence. But King Ammar is the one who sent me this battle replay, and he is going to be playing as Harad today. The AP will be very useful against the Dwarven factions that he's going to be facing off against today. Southron Warband here pushing up some of the siege towers. Haradrim Spearmen obviously much more of a disposable unit, some more Warband. We have some more Haradrim Spearmen and more Southron Warband as well. So the first line of spears, some of them are trash, some of them at least have AP, which will make them a little bit more useful. Upgraded dismounted Serpent Guard, a very good line infantry. They will still be outclassed by the line infantry that the defenders will have on this occasion, because both Elven and Dwarven factions can obviously outclass the Haradrim in this regard, but at least the Serpent Guard will put up much more of a fight than some of their more basic units will. There's also one without the armour upgrade over here. We also have the Muhards, so we have the Beast Tamers, we have the Beast Hunters, so a combination of the Polearms and the Javelins, both of which can be useful as long as they're used correctly. The Javelins in particular will be quite necessary for Harad here to get the best out of their army. The Serpent's Fangs as well, the Poison Arrows, again it's unlikely you're going to be routing the defenders on this occasion. Maybe Erebor, they've got slightly lower morale than Mirkwood and Khazad, who are their allies today. But even if you do, they're just going to go back to the town centre, and because of the size of the map, that's not all that far away from where they would be initially anyway. But still, good damage both in melee and at range, so still a good supporting unit. Demons of the Desert and the Champions of Nafrat will obviously be the main danger for Harad here, going into the settlement, because they can do horrendous damage with their big javelins at range, and the Champions of Nafrat are one of the best AP shot troops in the game, which will be very useful against the Dwarven factions. Haradrim Archers for a little bit of support, and Beast Tamers as well. So yeah, pretty much what you'd expect from Harad. Numbers, some supporting tools, mainly their javelins, and then they've got a bit of AP as well. A bit surprising not to see the Trollmen, because they would be very useful in this sort of situation, but he's got more numbers as a result of not bringing the Trollmen, so there is always that. Then we have Keller, who's going to be playing as Isengard, a name that I haven't seen before, I don't believe. He's got a catapult, and the crew consists of this one dude, apparently. Don't know where the rest of the catapult crew is, but they're around, I suppose, because the battle hasn't started yet. He's got some Uruk-hai pikemen, which of course could be very useful, but I think they're in range of the skirmishers that are on the walls, so they really need to be careful not to get shot up before the battle even begins for them, as it were. Uruk-hai crossmen are there. We've got some Lurtz hunting pack pushing up the siege tower, Uruk-hai infantry, guards of Orthanc, more infantry pushing up those siege towers, so some interesting units pushing up these siege towers, but at least it gives them a little bit of cover, I suppose. A small unit like that doesn't even extend beyond the boundaries of the tower itself, so I suppose it is a good idea in many ways. Uruk-hai infantry going to be pushing up one of the rams as well. Pikemen, more pikemen, a lot of rams, so pretty much every unit he's brought is on a piece of siege equipment at the start. Uruk-hai archers, and way at the back we have the devastating Nazkai. So I mean, he's brought a lot of siege equipment here. He's in no danger of all of them being destroyed at the very least, but it'd be interesting to see how he approaches going into what is a primarily Mirkwood defence over on his side of things, so his pikemen need to be careful. Over on this side of things we have Ord Malleus, who's going to be playing as Numenor. In terms of quality, this is really going to be the attacking faction, which is going to be holding it all together. Belagai footmen, so the Black Numenorians, how will they do here? Stuff like the Royal Legion of Armenelos, of course, are very capable of sort of counting themselves among the best line infantry in the game, alongside the Dwarven offerings, of course. But we'll see how well they can perform in an actual battle situation here. Numenorian Shield Guard with their AP and their really high defensive values will be very useful as well. Numenorian Cohort with their quality. Numenorian Steel Bows with their armour piercing. Seafarers with their armour piercing. Narrow Iris Sentinels at the back, and of course the terrifying Pharazim Swordmasters, who, in terms of a unit of bodyguard tier shock infantry with swords, should be able to outclass everything that's on the defence today. I mean, if they come toe-to-toe with the upgraded Palace Guard, that would be an interesting one, because the Palace Guard do have AP, but can they get through the 3 hit points of the Pharazim Swordmasters? That would be a real battle of the Titans. We're unlikely to get that in a vacuum anyway, but it's something worth considering regardless. Froggy is going to be playing as the Orcs of the Misty Mountains. There's a lot of heavy goblins here pushing up these siege towers, as well as the Rams. Heavy goblin infantry in 0.97, 0.1 are very cheap now, only 350 florins each, I believe, which makes them much more of an enticing proposition in this sort of battle, where you need a lot of numbers, over something like the Mountaineer at Coast, whereas before it was a no-brainer to bring the Mountaineer at Coast and the extra quality every time. Heavy Goblin Spears, of course, with their AP, should be useful still. Heavy Goblin Archers for a little bit of support at the back. We still have the Mountaineer at Coast, which is a good addition as well. Obviously, the numbers for the Heavy Goblin Infantry to get things set, and then bringing forward a little bit more quality to try and get through the outer defences. And we also have the Heavy Goblin Crossbows, a no-brainer in this situation, because their punch is just something you really can't be living without as the Misty Mountains in this situation, I think, especially against the Dwarves. Black Uruks, the Mountains, for a little bit more melee skill in melee, and some Goblin King's Bodyguard at the back to tie everything together. The Misty Mountains and Numenor are also much more able to support one another because of the angle they're coming at the fortress at, which is good because it's pretty much the most quantity-focused attacking faction with the most quality-focused one. It's not a luxury the other two will have. Having said that, on the defence, down in the lower reaches over here, we can see they're going to be going up against Crow, playing as the Dwarves of Khazad. He's got the Warriors of Khazad up on the walls. He's got some 2nd Legion Axe Guard there as well. Sons of Durin are ready to get on the walls as well from Erebor, Joran, Crazy. So nice to see that they're mixing and matching here. We've got the Ironfoot Crossbows and Orc Hunters immediately on the walls and immediately in range, so it's going to force the attackers into immediate action. Hammers of Gundabad down here. We can see the Warriors of Khazad once again. Obviously a good unit of really solid basic line infantry by Dwarven standards, which should be more than enough to deal with most other line infantry the attackers are throwing at them one-to-one. Upgraded Serpent Guard could probably just about edge them out. I'm not even sure about that though, because the numbers might be such that the Warriors of Khazad win that as well. But certainly the Numenorian cohort can defeat them. Might be close between them and the Uruk High Infantry as well, now that I come to mention it. 1st Legion Pikes. This could be a battle where we see the 1st Legion really shine. In the last battle in Moria, we actually saw them mostly peppered up by javelins and the like. But now that with their AP, they could be exactly what the defenders need in this situation. Legion Bodyguard on the walls, Orc Hunters, Warriors of Khazad in support with some 3rd Legion. So they're definitely front-loading their defence here, the defenders, which is interesting. Especially against Numenor and the Misty Mountains, who should offset one another's strengths and weaknesses quite well. Guards of Khazad here, up on the hill. We also have a Erebor catapult, some Erebor Obsidian Guards. We get back into the town centre, which is mostly manned by Khazad units actually. Erebor have got their Dragon Slayers over here, but 2 Sons of the Fallen and some Mithril Guard holding down the fort there. Having to go up against the Haradrim is going to be primarily an Erebor focused army, so we've got some Ironfoot Warriors, some Erebor Legionaries, the higher quality line infantry unit, the Axe Guard of Erebor. He's got some cavalry as well, the Ironfoot Hammer Guard. They need to get out of the fortress pretty quickly actually in order to be effective. If they get sort of bottled up in the fort, they're not going to be all that useful, to be honest with you, and Harad are close enough to the walls that it could be a little bit dicey to get them out quickly enough, but they definitely need to do that if they're going to be effective. The Hammer Guard can be brutally effective, but only if they have room to manoeuvre like most cavalry. Son of Gimli is going to ironically be playing as the Elves here. The Hiri out for Mirkwood, going to be a very strong unit of line infantry, of course. It's going to be all for Isengard to do here, because of course the Elves are going to be able to do a lot of damage at range quite quickly. Woodland Realm Patrol, Hiri Lung and Hiri Ek in here. Spears of Emondwyr. Greenwood Watchers, which are the assassin unit of course with their throwing knives. Should be interesting to see how they perform. Woodland Realm Axemen with their dual axes. Obviously for their price they're very very good in melee, both at dealing damage and at keeping themselves alive with their dual wielding. Up on the hill we have some Hiri Pang, and then over here some Spears of Emondwyr and some Woodland Realm Patrol, and I would imagine, yes indeed, there's another pocket of Mirkwood resistance over here. More Axemen, Greenwood Watchers, and some Woodland Protectors as well, which are the new name for the Javelin unit. It's interesting actually that Mirkwood have actually gone for a little bit more of a numbers focused army than you would expect from a defending army, but that could actually work out in their favour, because it's not as if it's a poor quality army. They do have more numbers however to play with, and as long as they can keep the Orcs at arm's length, I think that army could very well work out. But without further ado, let's begin. And we're going to get underway very very quickly here, as right from the start the Orc Hunters of Khazad using their fire arrows to shoot into the ranks of the heavy goblins who are going to be pushing up the engines of war to their gates. Can't imagine that the Orcs of the Misty Mountains would be able to build a ram like this all on their lonesome. They don't strike me as the sort to have access to plentiful wood supplies even. Assuming these are the same goblins that came from Moria. Meanwhile, Erebor Catapult immediately firing off, but I would suggest this isn't really all that worthwhile. I think Froggy will be all too happy to see the catapult not waiting for a big blob to appear in the lower bailey there, and instead starting to shoot into what is a very cheap unit of Goblin line infantry. Like the heavy Goblin infantry, as I said, 350 florins is a very low cost now for this unit. And it definitely makes the Misty Mountains more likely to bring them, which will of course feed more into their numbers focused approach. Also the Ironfoot Crossbows immediately opening up as well, so I mean this unit of poor heavy goblins is getting absolutely massacred on the approach to the wall by artillery, by archers and by crossbows. But I mean that's a lot of ammunition going down the drain here for the defenders. Like, you need to pace yourself as the defenders. I do agree that maybe one unit of Orcons of Khazad could lay into them a little bit, just to give them something to think about, especially with the fire arrows, because it might make them break before they arrive to the walls. But it's a lot of ammunition to pour into this unit, especially seeing as a lot of it's hitting the ram. The ram may very well crumble. And again, there goes more shots from the Erebor Catapult. If they're going to go after an army this viciously, they should probably be worth waiting for Numenor to do their thing. Meanwhile, over here, much less of an active approach by Erebor over on this side, maybe focusing on helping out Khazad on the approach where two armies are besieging them. But with no units up on the walls here, Harad may have a clear run to take the wooden walls, which would be a bit of a mistake I think for Erebor. I do think they need to keep contesting the walls, because especially with the lower quality troops that are manning the siege towers, if you have the Ironfoot warriors ready to receive them, they're going to get massacred as soon as they touch the walls. So probably be more prudent to have them ready and waiting. It's not even as if there's artillery waiting to do the business either, so you don't really have any need to not man the walls and just keep your troops there. Over here, meanwhile, Woodland Realm Patrol moving. Hiri Lung are also over there. Isengard are sort of consolidating their force into one big chunk, having initially deployed quite wide. For some reason, he's now sort of reversed that decision, but he does have a catapult, to be fair, which Mirkwood do need to be a little bit more aware of, because for some reason his catapult crew is invisible, which is interesting. But Isengard definitely doing the right thing here, because you can see one of the downsides to having wooden walls like this is they will crumble far quicker than stone walls, and with just one volley you're able to devastate a unit that is on the walls, and that was mainly, Blacklock Engineers were included in that as well, so a very good catch there from Isengard. If you can shoot them again, that would be very... Actually, he's on a section now which is classified as building, so it doesn't really matter too much. But Isengard doing the right thing here. If Mirkwood is not going to move off the walls in the face of that artillery, they should absolutely stay as they are. And there go the First Legion Pikes, ready to receive their enemies. I mean, you can see here that some of the siege towers have already crumbled, so enough punishment was delivered to the Goblin soldiers' equipment that it did actually fall by the wayside. But they have enough siege towers in reserve, they don't really need to worry about that. Heavy Goblin archers firing in. I'm a little surprised they're going after the guards of Khazad, to be honest with you. And there's another, again, like a ton, and that's Palace Guard. Well, that was an officer actually, I don't think that was Palace Guard, I think that was Woodland Realm Patrol still, but still, Mirkwood really not learning their lesson there, and Isengard reaping a bloody harvest over on that side of the battlefield. Fortunately, things are going a little bit better for the defenders over here. They're unlikely to budge too much with two Dwarven factions, but a little surprised. I mean, the guards of Khazad, multiple HP, very heavily armoured, shielded. Heavy Goblin archers not too likely to do tons of damage to them. If you dump your entire ammo supply, you may kill a handful, but it's unlikely to have too much of an impact there. Meanwhile, over here, Heavy Goblin infantry, the first one's in, but they're having to deal with Legion Bodyguard and Orcons of Khazad pulling out their dual axes. Not going to go too well for them. Yeah, Harad, maybe, of all the attackers, and again, looking pretty good for them, perhaps. Having a little look over on this side of things, you can see that the Harajans women, yeah, uncontested, they're being allowed to get on the walls here, so it's a real weird setup here from the defenders so far. I don't know whether Erebor as a newer player is just focused on the other side of things, sort of microing his units, helping out Khazad, but you really need to have a little bit more awareness than that if that is the case, because it's not going to go too well for Erebor over here if they just allow Harad in, because if you allow Harad in and onto the walls and you let them get their javelins set, it's going to be pretty painful for for the Dwarves. I mean, they know that if they get into melee with Haradrim Spearmen against this Dwarven infantry, it's going to go pretty poorly for them. But you may as well engage, because, I mean, it does mean that at least the Dwarves are not going to be able to move forward and try and force them back out. Yeah, very, very strange indeed. While over here, still the Isengard catapult continues, and I think finally Mirkwood do get the idea, and they are now finally getting rid of their units up on the walls. I'm not entirely sure what the Dwarven or the Isengard catapult is firing at now. Maybe the arrow towers to prevent a little bit of support from the defenders here. It's actually a good thing in this situation that Mirkwood did go a little bit more numbers heavy, because it means they're going to be able to absorb those casualties far easier than they would have done if they'd gone full quality focus like the elves normally do. So perhaps not the stinging blow that could have been, but still, it does pay to have a little bit more awareness, and obviously wooden walls certainly not going to be up to the same sort of level as stone walls. All it takes is one volley, and the entire section of wall will crumble, and any troops on it will die instantly. As the Mirkwood player has now most certainly learned. You can see here the heavy goblin infantry taking a few pot shots. Well, the towers is taking a few pot shots at the heavy goblin infantry, but so far a little bit of a lull in proceedings here. Both the Misty Mountains and Numenor perhaps unsure about how to approach this. I mean, if they wanted to wait, they could very well do so, because I do feel as though Harad is more likely to get further into the settlement here than the other attackers. I mean, especially here, like you can see now, Erebor is certainly taking more of an active role in the defence. The Axe Guard of Erebor charging out, and obviously they're going to be able to do a lot of damage to the upgraded Serpent Guard here. Obviously big AP values on these heavily armoured Dwarven soldiers, but they've chased the Haradrim just a little bit too far, I think, and now Harad should be able to isolate and destroy this single unit of Dwarven shock infantry. More to the point, Erebor still aren't trying to get rid of the Haradrim that have set up on these walls. Slowly but surely, these Southron Warband are actually taking damage from the towers. But I mean, that's not really going to be all that much of a concern. Like, they don't do tons of damage all that quickly. And what are the Southron Warband going to do now? They're actually going to get down off the walls. I mean, they are AP, but even with the AP, have the Haradrim taken the walls? Doesn't look like it. Well, regardless, I mean, even with their AP, they're going to need to be quite careful here, because the Ironfoot Warriors, for their cost, are one of the most efficient units of line infantry there are. The AP will be useful, but the Southron Warband are going to need a little bit more support coming in through the main gate, I think, if they're going to make this stick. This isn't a particularly well-organised defence from Erebor, I have to say, though. And Harad should be able to get more damage done than they otherwise would have. So King Hamar is taking good advantage of the relative disorganisation from Erebor. Yeah, this unit of Axe Guard is going to get overwhelmed here. I mean, yeah, some of the units like Haradrim Archers and Spearmen, garbage in melee, really, but through sheer numbers here, the Axe Guard of Erebor, they're doing a very good job still. I mean, it does go to show that quality does do very well in this situation, even though they will ultimately end up losing this. It's perhaps going to be a little bit more costly for Harad than they wanted to. Clearly what they want is this unit of Axe Guard out of the way quickly, so they can support their spears that are fighting their hardest within the walls. But I don't think they're going to be able to get through quickly enough, so the Dwarven player seems to have stumbled on something, more accidentally I think, that has actually turned out to work quite well. Now though, is when Harad can do what I feared they were going to do from the start, which is put their javelins up on the wall and start raining death down upon Erebor. If Erebor doesn't realise this is what's happening quickly and get some units up there to engage them in melee, they're going to be in massive, massive trouble, because as soon as you start peppering the Dwarves up with javelins and engaging them with even lower tier armour-piercing troops, you're going to get some really good efficiency against them. Meanwhile, over here, there's just the carcasses of these siege towers everywhere. Now the heavy goblins are starting to try and move in to the settlements. Obviously, this is going to go about as well as you would expect against First Legion pikemen. I mean, heavy goblin infantry and archers are certainly not going to be able to make much happen in melee. You can see just a pile of goblin corpses. One dwarven body lies among their number. But like I said, I honestly don't think that the Misty Mountains and Numenor taking more of a conservative approach is the wrong thing to do here. I actually think if they're going to do this, they should commit more heavily to it and not commit these units forward. Just have enough to make it so that, you know, the defenders have to stay here. Like this unit of heavy goblin archers, it's fine to keep them here, but just sort of bide your time and wait until Isengard and Harad can do their thing. And then when the time is right, come forward with everything all at once and try to overwhelm the defenders. Because the defenders have definitely front-loaded on this section of the fortress more so than the other two. You could argue against Isengard they have as well, because it's mostly Mirkwood's army alone over here, but it is a big proportion of it. Isengard's still yet to really move forwards. I mean, this is where Isengard, they've done some good damage with the catapult. Taken out a tower, punched a few holes in the walls, got some good damage as well. They're actually pushing their catapult over to the other side, which could be really, really good against the Dwarven defenders that are on the wall. So I can understand what Isengard is thinking there. As soon as he gets his catapult in position over there, though, to start helping his allies, I would suggest that he then also needs to start attacking against Mirkwood over here. So you're pressurising every angle of the fortress. Meanwhile, those Erebor catapults again proving to be a little bit wasteful. Trying to take pot shots at the units here in the far back, but not really having any sort of great success. It's over here, though, where a good proportion of the action is actually happening at the moment. This is a little bit weird. There's no way the Muhard Beast Hunters have already used up all their ammunition, surely. There are the Hashari Stalkers, so, you know, the Haradrim Rangers are getting into position. The Dwarves are going to be able to resist Ranger fire better than most factions with their heavy armour and shields, but Rangers, regardless of who you are, if you're fighting in a blob, they're going to be able to do some good damage. Yeah, this is a little bit interesting, this. The Muhard Beast Hunters can't have used their ammunition, and yet they're being used in melee. They do have actually AP in melee, they use maces, but weird decision making here from both defenders and attackers. But the defenders are definitely the ones bearing the brunt of the Haradrim Fury over here, because in spite of that rather strange decision to commit the javelins early, ultimately everything else the Haradrim have done has been the right thing. Hashari Stalkers firing into the backs of those Dwarven warriors over there, Erebor Legionaries. This might be where some of the javelins went, actually, now that I look at it again, because these Erebor Legionaries have taken damage. A few losses for the Hammer Guard as well, some warriors of Khazad. Not a particularly reactive defensive force, I have to say. I mean, certainly I do feel as though these are newer players, because I haven't seen their names before for a start. But yeah, they're not reacting all that quickly to the danger that is upon them. Which is a sure sign of a newer player. Hashari Stalkers getting down off the walls. I mean, it is interesting as well that King Ammar, who is not a newer player, is making some rather strange decisions. Like the Rangers, having taken a few pot shot volleys in, have decided to go into melee against Dwarven infantry, which is a very odd decision indeed. Could it be that he's taking pity on his beleaguered foes? He'd do well to not show arrogance of that level, but I think he's just going to try and get his units into an even more advantageous position. Let's see over here, yeah, a little bit more of a full-blooded assault coming now, and it is weird, you know, like over here is definitely where the defenders are placing more of their attention, the Dwarven defenders at the very least, because once again we're seeing a sally out here from the defenders. 3rd Legion Infantry getting up close and personal with the Black Uruks of the Mountains. Interesting fight this actually, heavy swordsmen against Dwarven axe line infantry. But that really is going to be the kicker here. The Seafarers from Nindamos getting a really nice volley into their backs. And once again, a questionable decision here, but this is all a learning experience for the defenders. And the good thing about playing as the Dwarves and the Elves on the defence is the fact that your quality can see you over the line even if you do make mistakes like this. That catapult there hitting really the wrong section of wall. They need to be careful because they can't really hit this section of wall anymore, otherwise they'll kill their own snow trolls. Having said that, I don't think the snow trolls are actually going to do all that well here if they stay in melee against 2nd Legion Axe Guard. It's exactly the sort of unit that trolls would be quite poor against, especially the slightly less tanky trolls like the snow trolls. 1st Legion Pikes still blocking the way through the gate, and still these heavy Goblin infantrymen not too eager to jump into the abyss that is the Legion bodyguard that sit there and wait for them. What's going on here? Uruk-hai archers getting into position, so still Isengard, definitely a player here who likes to take his time, try and do as much damage as possible before sending in the full-blooded infantry assault, which again, to be honest, is probably the sign of a slightly newer player. It's not actually the wrong thing to do in this situation, I will say. I think that, you know, Mirkwood have got enough numbers here that it could be a real issue for Isengard if they come forward and they're not prepared to deal with it. But I mean, it's definitely a player with a campaign mindset, I would say, who wants to go about their business as efficiently as this. In one-off battles in online environments, you can get away with being a lot more aggressive. That was catapult shots, but where from? Where be the catapults? Ah, over the hill there, threading the needle and actually getting some decent hits. Not as many as perhaps they would need. I think the situation over here has already turned into a bit of an unwinnable one for the Dwarven defenders. They placed too much of their attention over on the Numenor Misty Mountains assault, and as a result, the Harad have been able to make good progress. They've got their supporting units in a good position. The Serpent's Fangs, which this is actually where the poison arrows and their morale debuff may come in actually quite handy, because it will get rid of this Dwarven defense even quicker. Ashari Stalkers with their body piercing will be able to do much the same thing. It has cost the Haradrim, to be fair. Before I lose my voice. It has cost the Haradrim this, as it will, like even against a poorly optimised Dwarven defence, like they're going to be able to do a lot of damage to sort of more basic Haradrim units, because King Ammar did go for a more numbers focused Haradrim army, I would say. Definitely omitting the Trollmen is somewhat of a unique strategy against the Dwarves for Harad to take. But Harad is still going to be more than happy with how this battle has gone, and of course if Harad can get into the settlement and start gaining ground in there, it should give more opportunities for the attackers on the other sides to start doing the business as well. Once again though, a little bit of more of a lull in proceedings over here. Yes, the trolls are doing some good damage to the Ironfoot crossbows up here on the walls, but they will peter out sooner rather than later, I would imagine. And still Numenor and the Misty Mountains yet to really go in for a full-on assault. Just look at all the dead siege towers around here. It's a good thing they brought so many, to be honest with you. There's a lot of units over here just waiting. Numenorian cohort thinking about going in, turning the corner, immediately seeing the first Legion Pikes and then thinking better of it. You can see there that the heavy Goblin crossbows trying to do their best to whittle down at the soldiers which are guarding the gate. Interestingly enough, it is going to be the 3rd Legion which take the brunt of those casualties, which will be good for the defenders. 1st Legion Pikes definitely key to holding on to that gate for as long as possible, but of course when there's enough of a manpower deficit there, they will be able to just come forward with sheer numbers. The Blacklock Engineers have made their way over here. They've got their weapons and shields out. Can't imagine they've used up their ammunition. I haven't even seen them use any of their ammunition. Another siege tower gets onto the walls. Black Uruks of the mountains starting to make some progress as well. And again, the defenders not too eager to force them off, which is interesting. It is definitely a strange battle so far. Definitely not the kind of defence I'm used to seeing. But you can see here the Dwarven quality really showing itself, because they have made up more ground on the attackers once again. The warriors of Khazad pushing the Haradrim back through. Maybe Harad getting a little bit too confident, feeling as though they could just send in their lower tier units and deal with the Dwarven infantry that way. When you have the Dwarves on the back foot, you need to keep them there. You can't afford to try and pull your punches. You need to just go all in. And over here, still some Dwarven resistance as well. Some Ironfoot warriors surviving their encounter with both the Southron Warband and the Muhad Beast Hunters in melee. I mean, with the Serpent's Fangs coming in melee as well, they're very accomplished up close and personal with those big two-handed show tells. They should be just fine, but time will tell. Meanwhile, Mirkwood actually pulling back, effectively surrendering the lower bailey over here to the attackers, the Uruk-hai infantry. What is this guy doing? Just one Woodland Realm patrol. He was the lone man that survived the devastation that happened on the walls over here. So he's just going to continue to take pot shots on the enemies as they roll in. Well, regardless. Again, Isengard, how slow Isengard are being is also the sign of a newer player. Like I said, it's the player with the mindset of someone who's played campaign a lot more than multiplayer, I would suggest, when you're sort of being this conservative, when you're sort of sending forward individual units, probing, you know, because the AI are much less likely to take advantage of any mistakes that you may make in this regard. Players are. I mean, it's fortunate, I suppose, for Isengard that the guy he's facing off against, Son of Gimli, also appears to be a newer player, or at least someone who hasn't played a great deal of Reforged multiplayer, because both of them essentially are making some of the same mistakes. The Uruk-hai infantry over here will be rather soundly defeated by the Elven infantry that's on the defence, unless there is support forthcoming for the Uruk-hai infantry, maybe some Uruk-hai archers taking some pot shots into the side of the Mirkwood troops, but definitely a very slow burn of a battle over here. The initial artillery volleys would have been a good start for any player, but since then the battle has come to a dead stop really over on that side of things. Over here meanwhile, the attackers trying to buckle the 1st Legion pikes and get through their phalanx quickly, but over here, for once, it appears as though the defenders have had good responses to this. They've immediately jumped on this big mass push, and they're really sort of fortifying this line. Hammers of Gundabad coming forward, but the problem they're having is there's not really anything to save their defenders up on the walls. They're going to try and get some more units up there now, some warriors of Khazad, but like I said, they're going to be going up against a Numenorian cohort, so the cohort will be superior to the warriors of Khazad. There's a few Ironfoot crossbows in melee there as well, but that's not going to be enough to turn the tide up on the walls here. And over here, finally, some more moves being made over here as well. I mean, the Legion Bodyguard are obviously going to be far superior. Even though it's not heavy Goblin infantry and it's now Mountaineer at Coast, a slightly scarier unit, it's still no contest really for some of the finest units that Khazad are able to field. But I mean, still, they should be able to clean that up. It's really over here that they're going to have to be careful, because now the Numenorians have got an opportunity here to go along the walls, clean everything up that's over here, and then start advancing into the lower bailey from other angles. Blacklock Engineers are over there once again, Highborns of Erebor. I mean, this assault has made it some distance, but actually the defenders should be able to hold this Numenorian push at bay, at least for the time being. Most interesting. It's interesting that the defenders were so quick to respond to that and yet so slow to respond to the pushes over on the other side. I mean, the Haradrim have definitely taken more losses than maybe they would have liked considering the situation at one point, but Harad are ultimately still going to be successful here, and that means they're going to be able to put pressure onto the defenders further into the settlement, which is probably going to mean the siphoning of resources off from the pushes on the other sides. Not many dwarves left facing off. The Serpent's Fangs were the straw that broke the camel's back over here. And finally this defence should be gotten rid of by Harad, and they can start moving further into the settlement. What Harad have left, I mean, they still have their polearm units, very useful in the late game, although they're actually getting slowly but surely bled out by the towers. And of course the main thing is going to be the Demons of the Desert and the Champions of Nafrat, 2 units which are going to be potentially very dangerous to the defenders that are further in. Just look at Mirkwood's army though, it is a big defensive army from the elves. Again, from a newer player like this, I don't know what the thinking was behind that, but it may end up really saving the defenders bacon here. The fact they have more in reserve than maybe the attackers may have expected. Especially from the elves with their higher melee defense. I mean, in come the Uruk-hai pikemen trying to establish a bit of a beachhead over here, using their pikes to try and kill the elves that way. Not the worst idea. The problem is, again, this is the sure sign of a newer player, dribbling in your attacking units and not having your reinforcements anywhere near the front line is definitely quite poor in my opinion. And the Isengard player may very well end up paying a pretty dear price for that, because this is not going to get you anywhere, this assault over here. The elves are going to be able to easily going to be able to deal with this. And despite the initial good work from the artillery, I really feel as though Isengard are putting themselves on the back foot here. And Son of Gimli and Mirkwood could well prove to be the saviours of the defenders here, because I do think eventually the dwarves are going to buckle under the pressure that is being sent their way. Speaking of which, more Numenorians coming forward. I mean, it says defeat is almost a certainty against the dwarven defenders they're going up against, and for the time being, yes, but the dwarves are definitely going to take damage from doing this, and Numenor and the Misty Mountains simply have more men to burn through than the dwarves do at this point in time. Some routing going on here. Heavy Goblin crossbows in a good position as well to start doing some damage, and actually the Heavy Goblin crossbows, I think they're actually going after the units on the lower ground here. Still a lot of Legion Bodyguard left alive. Mountaineer at Coast, I mean, for the time being they're actually going up against only Orc Hunters. They should do okay against Orc Hunters in melee, but as soon as the Legion Bodyguards start getting stuck in again, it's going to be pretty rough for them. Heavy Goblin Spears getting on the wall. Still a few Dwarven defenders putting up a good fight of it over on this section of wall over here, but I can't imagine that's going to last too much longer, and then they should be able to either go further down here. Like, again, we can actually see that was the Iron Watch, wasn't it? It is. It's the Iron Watch of Boromir. What are they doing? We saw how devastating they can be in the last battle in Moria, and I don't think... I mean, that presumably is the cause of this then. I was wondering how so many of them died to just crossbows and towers, but I assume it must be the Iron Watch of Boromir that did this. Which, I mean, fair enough. Good damage. But now the Dwarves are starting to sandwich them. Like, they really should have done that sooner. The Iron Watch could also be devastating the Numenorians as they come through the gate. So it's all about picking and choosing your targets. The Sons of Durin are just sort of hanging out here. Again, I feel as though if this had been more experienced players, the defenders would have been able to really punish Numenor in the Misty Mountains here. As it is, though, I think the attackers are going to get the better of this fight eventually. The Highborns of Erebor coming down the hill now, taking a few hits from the crossbows as they do so, but as soon as they get into melee with these heavy goblin spears, who are a little bit stretched, having forced their way through the Dwarven defenders over there, they immediately rout as a result. But you can see the Dwarven defenders, they're putting up a real fight of it still, but their cohesion is going down. The defenders are shoring things up once again though. Sons of Durin, that's a lot of AP damage heading the way of the attackers, which is going to be bad for the heavy goblins. The only survivability they have is from their makeshift armour after all. But Harad, they are now in. The defenders finally dealt with. It's a small army that Harad have left, but now Harad should be able to dictate the pace of the battle to a certain extent, because now they will be able to attract the attention of more of the defenders. I mean, Mirkwood, to be fair, can probably get away with sending over reinforcements. Isengard are in no position that they're going to be super aggressive, so if I were Mirkwood in this situation, I would turn my attention to trying to wipe away Harad with most of my army, to be honest. Because you got to know what your enemy's style is, and Isengard's style is very, very conservative indeed. Not aggressive at all. And you can really take advantage of that if you're the defenders in this situation, but equally, the defenders have not really been all that good at reacting to this sort of thing in this battle. And the Demons of the Desert doing a lot of damage there. I mean, most of those units should probably... Well, I say that, most of those units should get back up. Those Mithril Guard have been devastated there by the Demons of the Desert, shooting right down the line. That is a really bad loss for the defenders, this, because the Mithril Guard are 3 hit points. And that's the thing, like, the Demons of the Desert, if you get a perfect shot with them, they are devastating. Well, they got a bit big for their boots there. I think King Ammar, once again, getting a little bit overconfident and getting a little bit too close. But already the Demons of the Desert, that would have been worthwhile. They've devastated the Mithril Guard. They've done a bit of damage to the Sons of the Fallen as well. Not good. And again, battlefield awareness, reactions, poor from the defenders. And I do feel as though this is going to really add up. Like, it's a 4v3, so its mistakes aren't quite as pronounced for the defenders as it would be in a 5v3. But even so, like, you can't really afford to be this static and not have it come back to bite you. And I think ultimately, like, they've done pretty well over here against Numenor in the Misty Mountains. There was room for improvement even over here as well, though. And you can actually see over here there's a lot of mounted Uruk Coast up on the wall. Black Uruks of the mountains as well. I mean, it's going to be a difficult task for them to mulch their way through the Legion bodyguard. And down on the low ground, I mean, they're still putting up a very good fight down on the low ground, but most of that is because of the fact they've just got elite infantry stood in the way. Guards of Khazad with their AP, Highborns of Erebor, Sons of Durin, 1st Legion Pikes still alive. But as the attackers, like, sometimes you have to do the dirty work and be essentially the cannon fodder. Misty Mountain's very used to that being their role in life, but Numenor maybe less so, but if it works, that's all that really matters. Over here, meanwhile, Isengard have yet to make any progress whatsoever. In fact, they've made negative progress. They're being pushed back down the hill. Over here, again, just basic Uruk-hai infantry being filtered in one by one. And really what you're acting as there is a conveyor belt into the elves. And the elves will be getting very good kills here. By the end of the battle, this one unit of Hiriak will probably have racked up a kill count that spearmen can usually only dream of having. And it's against decent troops as well. I mean, Isengard's troops are no pushovers, but overall the elven quality is just going to be better, particularly with the heavier Mirkwood units. And I think the time has come to start putting more pressure on this road over here. I mean, look at this, like this road is completely open and Isengard have not taken advantage of it at all. They've just like brainlessly like sort of gone into just the elven defense at its strongest point. Like a little bit of intelligence and awareness is required to realize that this isn't going to work. Like it's not yielding results. Harad just sort of waiting, and I feel as though the fact that the Haradrim are sort of moving up now in conjunction with Isengard is perhaps a sign that Harad has said to Isengard, listen, there's a free road over here that you need to take with some of your units. Like, it's not working what you're doing. At least I'm going to give King Ammar the benefit of the doubt and assume that he did say that, because he has played the game clearly much more than some of the people in this lobby have up till this point. Sons of the Fallen that were in the town centre coming down here. So again, they're really focusing on this corner of the settlement here, the defenders. More elite infantry coming down here. Up on the walls, meanwhile, Ironwatch and Mirrormere getting into melee. They are a bodyguard tier unit in melee, in much the same way as the Blacklock Engineers. I don't really feel as though they need to be, but that's a whole nother discussion, I think. They are going to get into melee and they are going to do a decent job. At the very least, they're going to bottle up the attackers for a little bit longer. Sons of Durin getting over here. Heavy Goblin Spears and Black Uruks the Mountains trying to pour out into the lower Bailey once again to try and do more damage to the Dwarven defenders that are here. But it's still very elite infantry that's down here in decent numbers. Here come the Mithril Guard. Heavily damaged by the Demons of the Desert they may be, but there's still 17 of them, which 17 Mithril Guard is still a big power spike to this defence down here, and Misty Mountains and Numenor still struggling to make up ground. I think both factions have clearly had their newer players and they've clearly made some rudimentary mistakes, we'll call it. This really is something that should have happened far earlier in the battle, considering how the defenders have set up, but it is happening now. Harad and Isengard directly attacking the town centre. Wooden Realm Axemen backing up the Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin that have remained here to try and hold down the fort. And some Spears of Amenduir also heading over here, which the Dragon Slayers mean that this will be something that they can hold on to at least for the moment. When the Champions of Nathrat reach the front line with all of this support around them, especially with all these polearms, that may be a different matter entirely. The catapult has been abandoned at this point. I mean, Harad don't have enough men really to start pressurising this road as well, which perhaps is the saving grace here for the defenders, because if they did, then the town centre would be getting attacked from all sides. I mean, Mirkwood should still have enough troops to react to this. But yeah, I do like the look of the Dragon Slayers ever since they were given this sort of higher def model. Very nice indeed. Axe blows raining down on the attacks as they move forward, but again, it's a matter of numbers here. Greenwood Watchers and here Repaid going to try and get some range support in here, which is definitely the right way to go about it, because those Muhards will take extreme damage from any sort of ranged unit, because of course next to no armour, not multiple HP either. We'll see how Mirkwood deal with that, because if they leave it as it is, they're going to get overwhelmed. Interesting here to see a bit of a retreat from Mirkwood as well. I mean, I think it's because the Uruk-hai crossbows have finally moved forward. So finally Isengard have stopped sort of just sending in their infantry alone without support, which is forcing Mirkwood to rethink their strategy. Mirkwood were allowed to benefit from Isengard's poor planning there for far too long, I think. But ultimately I don't think it's going to be too much of a problem for the attackers. I do still think the attackers have got the advantage so far. Greenwood Watchers throwing some of their daggers in. A few kills here and there, but ultimately it's going to be an issue here just in terms of sheer numbers, like I said. All of those Muhards backing up the Champions of Nathrat, a few Uruk-hai infantrymen mixed in here and there as well for a little bit of extra armour on the front line. The Spears of Amenduir did come over initially to reinforce, but again, they're not actually fighting at this point. They're behind the units that are fighting. Again, another sign of perhaps a little bit of inexperience. What have we got going on over here? Sons of the Fallen getting on the walls, sandwiching the Mountain Uruk host between themselves and what remains of the Dwarves over here, finally getting cleaned up by the heavy Goblin crossbowmen. But it doesn't matter, because still the Dwarves contest the wall over here. All of those arrows hitting the siege tower. None of them hitting the Sons of the Fallen. Obsidian Guard and Mithril Guard getting up onto the walls, finishing off the Numenorian cohort and the Seafarers of Nindamos. You have to feel a little bit for the Misty Mountains of Numenor, because for some reason the defenders have been much more active over here. More quality has been over here. They've moved their units much more readily than they have on the other fronts, which is strange. Kind of a disjointed element to that, but they're still performing a service, because the longer that those elite units remain down there facing off against Numenor and the Misty Mountains, the less time they are going to be spending up here, where Harad and Isengard are now making some more genuine progress. Some of these more basic elven units struggling against the sheer numbers that are coming towards them at this point. Yeah, that is something that I cannot condone. This is definitely the sign of a newer player, that. I mean, I know it's your general, but trying to save your elite infantry like that, nothing gets under my skin quite like that when I see players do that. Like, what are you saving your elite infantry for exactly? This is a one-off fight. You are now, at least Mirkwood now is improving over here. They're getting their units into sort of close quarters much more readily, but why would you pull back the most elite unit you've got on that front line, the anchor that you're using essentially, and essentially make them more of a target for ranged units as well? Like, it's much better to have them in melee, fighting and making progress there, than it is to retreat them. Cowardly. I know they're newer players, but one day, what I say will sink in, and people will stop trying to preserve the lives of their elite units meaninglessly. There goes the Misty Mountains General. And the confusing thing is, they've been perfectly happy to commit their elite infantry units down here into a real meat grinder of a fight. There's been no rhyme or reason to what the defenders have done in this battle so far, and if they do go on to win, it will be because they've lent on the quality of especially the Dwarven armies real hard. Real hard. Numenorian cohort still putting up a fight, but they're not going to be able to succeed there. More Sons of the Fallen coming down here. I mean, clearly what they want to do is finish off the Misty Mountains and Numenor sooner rather than later. Snark skirmishers over there. In come the Farazim Swordmasters though, as well as the Numenor Pikes, and with the committal of those, that may be the final straw. The Royal Legion of Armenelos are in here. They've been here for a little while though, taking a bit of damage already, but the Farazim Swordmasters at this point could be an all-conquering force, to be honest with you, especially if more reinforcements are committed in. I don't actually think they have any more reinforcements, so I think that's it, other than ranged units, which are doing their best to support as it is. Meanwhile, Isengard not yet prepared to... well, the Demons of the Desert there have taken some damage as well. Looks like they did try to get into a position to shoot through this Elven blob, but they paid the price for that because the Elven archers immediately opened up on them. So perhaps the right idea from King Ammar, considering how bad the reactions from the defenders have been in this battle so far. But on that occasion he did pay the price for that, so unfortunate for him. Meanwhile, even fight over here, Harad really picking up the slack. Harad have definitely been the attacking faction so far to have been able to deal the most damage and make the most ground on the defenders. Crossbow bolts flying in, and this is what I mean. What was the purpose behind this? Like, you took them off the front line, presumably because you don't want to lose your elite infantry units, but you ended up losing more than you would have anyway because you put them into range of the enemy ranged units, all because you didn't want them in melee because you didn't want them to perish. Again, it really bugs me that for some reason. Like, in campaign, like, you could maybe make more of an allowance for that, because you want to obviously sort of preserve your better units for more battles that will happen in the future. But this is a one-off battle in multiplayer. What are you saving them for? Doesn't make any sense to me. Regardless, here he Pang, firing in. Ooh, and they are actually able to get some pretty decent hits there with the angle into the Uruk-hai pikemen. That elven accuracy proving its worth doing a little bit more damage to the Isengard troops. And it is actually quite a precarious situation the attackers find themselves in, because Numenor and the Misty Mountains will ultimately, if they do end up winning, it'll be a heavily Pyrrhic victory, I would think, and even then I'm not sure they're going to. The Pharazim Swordmasters, it's an even fight at this point. I think the Pikes, the Naru Naru Sentinels, are going to make life quite difficult for the defenders over here at this point, because they're a really good support tool now that the First Legion Pikes are all gone. I mean, whoever wins over here, they're not going to have that much left, let's be honest. I think with the Naru Naru Royal Guard there, it will probably be the attackers actually. But Mirkwood still have a lot left. Harad eventually, despite the fact that they've definitely been the attacker to make up the most ground so far, they will eventually run out of steam doing this. This assault was pretty much the last roll of the dice for them, having taken quite a few losses getting through their gate. And then it's going to come down to what's left of Misty and Numenor and Isengard. I have to say Isengard as well have made pretty much the same errors as some of the newer names of the defenders. Like, slow to commit, and when they do commit, they do it like this. Like, sort of filtering in sort of battered and bruised units, trying to preserve too much of their manpower for later, when in reality what you really want to be doing is getting some units to start shooting the Hiripang like they're doing now, like Crossbows shooting into the Hiripang or the Lurtz Hunting Pack. Exactly the right thing to do, and back that up by a more genuine infantry push. Is Isengard actually going to do that? Guards of Orthanc moving forward, I mean, they have more reinforcements out here that they really need to be making use of, I think. We found out Isengard as well, like they threw away a lot of their units down here in this fight over here, which went quite poorly for them. What's going on over here? Isengard taking the long way around. Harad may not have had the manpower to push down this road as well, but Isengard do. I think it's a shame that it's going to end up being Uruk-hai crossbows that are out of ammunition, but it's better than nothing. This is one of the better decisions Isengard has made in this battle. There goes our Pharazon. Real bloody fight down there in the pits between Numenor and the Dwarves. This is a little bit more like it from Isengard though, pressurising multiple angles. It will force a reaction from Mirkwood as well, and if they continue to push up this road as well, could be enough to start crumbling this this Mirkwood defence. If Mirkwood doesn't respond to this as well, it could be pretty bad for them. So it means they're going to get into the back of this front line defence. I think they should still be able to dig their way out of it because of the quality of their troops, Mirkwood and the Dragon Slayers that are now in there. But it'll still be a little bit more damaging than it needed to be. And this is perhaps more the worrying thing. This unit of crossbows that does still have some ammunition. A few volleys into the back of that front line, and Isengard can start to make up for the questionable decisions they've made so far. Yeah, that's going to be damaging. They're going to need to respond to that in some way here, Mirkwood. They're going to do so by trying to kill off the unit that's out of ammunition first. I mean, that is what they're there for, to act as a screen. That's going to be brutal. And Harad holding them in place. It's kind of a hammer and anvil in many ways. Has the same effect in this situation anyway. Naru Naru Royal Guard using their fire arrows. Fire arrows not really going to do much here. As I said, I mean, Ironwatch and Mirrormere in melee at this point. Still those heavy goblin crossbowmen, and it does actually look as though the dwarven infantry is going to be victorious initially, but will they then have enough to clean up the heavy goblin crossbows and more useful perhaps for the attackers? The Naru Naru Royal Guard, they may be spears, but they're solid enough in melee. The more damage they can do at range now, the more likely it becomes that a victory occurs. These towers still doing the business. Still those Snaga skirmishers doing some damage as well. It's going to come down to supporting units here. I still think the attackers will very narrowly win that fight, but very narrowly is the key here. Isengard finally, oh, there goes the Dwarven General. Tried to save him earlier on in the Dragon Slayer unit, but in the end it turned out to be fruitless. Over here, Isengard doing the right thing, I would say. They got there in the end, attacking on multiple fronts, pulling the defenders across the battlefield, more units coming in now, Nazkai among their number. And I think considering the fact that even if the Dwarves do win down against Numenor, it's going to be with not many units left. I think this is the sign that the attackers are probably going to be able to go on to win this fight. Woodland Protectors closing down the Uruk-hai crossmen and stopping them from shooting, but the damage they've already done may very well prove to be terminal. They're going to fight hard in melee. They will ultimately lose to Woodland Protectors, of course, but their armour will keep them standing a little bit longer. They really need the Nazkai up on this front line at this point. More Haradrim Spears. They just need to commit stuff in. What have we got here? More units coming forward. Lurt's Hunting Pack, Demons of the Desert. Another fresh unit of Uruk-hai Pikemen. 2 units of Uruk-hai Pikemen. Need to commit these units quickly. If they do, it's just another big assault the defenders are going to have to deal with, and it's another big assault I'm not sure they're going to have the ability to deal with at all. Nazkai actually going to take the long way around. This is risky actually, because this assault is on the verge of collapsing, and I don't think 36 Haradrim Spearmen is going to keep it going for all that much longer. Nazkai going to try and save the crossbows. If they were going to do that though, they probably should have started moving sooner. And then they ultimately ended up doing so. Farazim Swordmasters, not many of them left at this point. Yeah, and there's not going to be enough left. I mean, there's some units closing down the ranged contingent of the Misty Mountains. But look at this, there's 5 Obsidian Guard, they're just going to get pulled down. There's 1 Royal Legion of Armenelos left, helping out his Goblin underlings, and that's going to be enough to kill off the Obsidian Guard. So yeah, the attackers are going to get a very narrow win over here, but it's going to be a precious win, I think, because it means no more elite Dwarven infantry is going to be able to move forward. Snaga Skirmish is getting up on top of the walls. Ultimately, these Dwarven infantrymen are going to be victorious, but the Nara and Aru Royal Guard are going to get down off the walls, and considering the numbers discrepancy here, and considering how the Nara and Aru are an elite unit in their own right, that should be enough to give the attackers the win, and I think they see that coming and they're going to try and retreat, but there goes the Harad General. Javelins coming in from the Snaga, so yeah, I think this is the beginning of the end for the defenders. A weird battle, both sides making pretty big mistakes from the newer players, as you would expect. I mean, players like King Amar and Froggy, names that we've seen play the game before, they're obviously going to be in a little bit better position than players that we haven't seen play the game before. And I feel as though Isengard have probably gotten better as the battle's gone on, to be honest with you. Some very strange decisions early on. I mean, started off very well with the artillery, then made trademark new player mistakes. But as the battle has gone on, pressurising multiple angles, much more like it. The defenders, mostly the same problems all the way around. I think Mirkwood have been a little bit too static. They weren't punished for that as much as they could have been by Isengard, because they made pretty much the same mistakes. But the 2 Dwarven players especially, like, not enough battlefield awareness. Simultaneously using their elite infantry well, in some cases down there, but also the Dragon Slayers, like, that's very indicative of a newer player. Down here as well, I mean, not reactive enough, I would suggest, has been the main problem for the defenders. All 3 of the defenders have been that way as well. Like, Mirkwood haven't reacted quickly enough, the 2 Dwarven players haven't reacted quickly enough, and that will add up. I mean, with the quality and with the army compositions they had, like I said, they had every expectation to go into this fight and pull out the victory here, but in the end I just don't think they've been able to take full advantage. And ultimately at this point, the individual units of quality are actually on the attacker's side. I mean, in particular the Nazkai, like, there's nothing really that is going to be able to match up to the Nazkai in melee at this point. They're going to be able to mulch their way through defenders. And if the defenders are going to win this at this point, they're going to need to organise slightly better, get units like the Woodland Protectors, if they still have ammunition, into a position to throw their projectiles, but that's not going to be the case, I don't think. And with the Nara and Aru Royal Guard coming forward, it's going to be the Snaga as well. These front lines, which to be fair, could hold on. These front lines could very well hold on for a little while yet. With a rear charge or some volleys into the back from the Snaga skirmishers, that's certainly not going to be the case. Another fresh unit of Uruk-hai pikemen being committed forward as well to make sure that the front line isn't lost too quickly. Haradrim spearmen also electing to go this way as well. In come the Nara and Aru Royal Guard, preventing the Woodland Protectors from, if they did still have ammunition, getting into a position where they could fire. If they didn't, Not entirely sure what they were doing, just hanging out anyway. Thranduil is actually in this unit as well. Interesting unit to have your general in. But he's not going to last too much longer, I would think, against the Black Numenorian Spear Archer hybrids. The very depleted elite units, which just about survived their brush with the Dwarves, are going to get into the rear of these Woodland Realm Axemen and help the Nazkai expedite their journey into the town centre. Yeah, and at this point the Nazkai are pretty much the strongest unit left on the field as a single unit. Snark Skirmishers Froggy getting into a good position to use up the rest of his ammunition. Those Dwarven elites as well, it's not as if they went back to the town centre, they sort of cowered in the corner as well. Like, what were they doing up here? What on earth were they doing up there? Like... Oh, for Christ's sake, shut up, announcer. There go the, to be fair, the Misty Mountains do break there, but maybe the Iron Watch, if they still had ammunition, the Iron Watch absolutely put them up there, but why would the Meteor Guard up there? You could have sent them to the town centre to help out Mirkwood against the Numenor Royal Guard. Instead, you sent them to the corner? Why? They're a melee infantry unit. What are you saving them for? It's so frustrating. Yeah, these Nazkai. I mean, at this point, it's too late anyway. Like, 4 Meteor Guard are not going to be enough to turn the tide of the battle at this point. But it's still just such a puzzling decision. Even if you're a newer player, like, surely you understand that putting your elite infantry over here, away from the town centre, which if you lose the battle, the timer starts. There's no getting out of that fact. It's just a bizarre decision. At this point, I mean, these throwing daggers, they might do enough to turn that fight around, but it's not going to matter too much when over here is where the true danger lies. Finally, the Dwarven elite infantry is going to come over here to the right position. And it's going to be too little too late, I think. Defeat seems certain for the Numenor Royal Guard. I think that the Nazkai, though, are the true danger here. They're not really losing that many unit models as they destroy the Woodland Realm Axeman. It is a close battle in terms of percentages, this, but I feel as though that's because both teams have had players make fairly serious mistakes. Haradrim Spearmen routing. Yeah, and I don't think these daggers are going to do damage quickly enough, to be honest with you. Lurks, Hunting Pack and Guards of Orthanc elite infantry units are here, backed up by pikemen. Even fight, apparently. If the defenders go on to win this, it will not be a deserved victory. I will say that much. Yes, Isengard have been a little bit sluggish in this fight and could have done far better and exploited the defenders far better than they did. But ultimately the attackers have done far less wrong than the defenders in this battle. And it could be a sign that, you know, of Dwarven. Anyway, as I was saying, it could be a sign here that the of Dwarven dominance on the defence. You don't even need to play particularly well and you can still pull out the victory. 2 players admitting defeat. I'm not sure who they would be. Could be Erebor. Could be one of them. Nope, Dragon Slayers are still alive, so all of the defenders are still here. So Harad and the Misty Mountains. Maybe Numenor as well. I don't think so though. I think Numenor would... Nope. 2 players have admitted. Surely not. I think the defenders might actually do this, you know. And like I said, no chance is that a deserved victory. I'm sorry if you're the defenders and you're watching this. If you go on to win this fight from here, it's not well deserved. Because my word, it does bring into... Jesus Christ, this announcer really loves the sound of his own voice. But it does bring into sharp relief the mistakes that Isengard did make in the middle of the battle there. Filtering kills into Mirkwood, not being all that proactive, far too slow. It also, I feel as though the compositions here from the defenders were actually really good. Like, their choice of army was bang on. Elites from the Dwarves, as well as the sort of solid line infantry. Mirkwood going for more numbers, I think was the right thing to do in this situation. It certainly was, because if they had elite infantry and Isengard was able to utilise those artillery pieces against them, it would have been much more painful than it ended up being. I mean, it could be at this late stage of the battle that something like Uruk-hai pikemen, we've seen it happen before, where pikes in the late game proved to be an insurmountable obstacle. Over here, meanwhile, I do think the Nazkai are actually going to be overwhelmed here. Before they do, though, they will certainly reap a heavy toll on the elves. They could even end up winning this fight, to be honest with you. I mean, it's not as if there's much Dwarven elite infantry left. The Hiriak are strong, but the Nazkai are a whole nother beast. The Folk of the Ring, I think, is what that translates to. Let's see. Dragon says, yeah, I think the attackers will just about be alright looking at this, just based on the units they have left. Because even if the Nazkai do get cleaned up, I think the sheer amount of pikes they have left, like based on what I've seen, I don't believe the defenders would have the foresight to go around and attack the pikes in the back. I think they would just go into the front of them and die. So I think that's how this battle is going to end. But what a bizarre fight this has been for this hill fort. Greenwood Watchers in melee now. Those throwing daggers did do a little bit of extra damage, to be fair. What have we got going on over here? One Spear of Emondweir. Going to join the efforts on the defence. Woodland Protectors over here. Yeah, look at these Nazkai. They're taking losses, certainly. But they're doing the business. Again, these javelins have got ammunition. Like, another situation where, over there, put your javelins up where the Greenwood Watchers were. Javelins into the pikes. You could win the fight. But again, the questionable decision-making continues. And the Nazkai, they're going to be able to get more kills than perhaps they should have with the support tools that were around them. Have they indeed? There's nothing even in here. Not a single unit remains in the town centre. The Woodland Protectors are just outside of it. Yeah, well. A strange battle indeed. As the snow falls, there goes the Isengard General. Without their own troops in the way, those javelins were able to clean up the Nazkai very, very quickly, actually. Again, like, what are you doing? What is this? I berated the Dwarven player for this, and I'm going to do the same to the Isengard player as well. What are you doing? You're showing your back to the enemy, and they're just going to javelin you to death. This, as well, makes it far more likely that the Woodland Protectors could go over to the other side and turn the tide of the battle as a whole. If the attackers go on to lose this battle because of this, hoo boy. Hoo boy. What are the Woodland Protectors going to do? I mean, they need to get over here quickly, and they need to have enough ammunition left to do substantial damage to the Uruk-hai pikemen. There's still 12 guards. Defeat seems certain. Like, ooh dear. Oh no. Could it be? Could it be? I mean, it really depends on how much ammunition the Woodland Protectors have left, to be honest with you. If they don't have any ammunition left and they have to just engage in melee immediately, then the pikes are going to be able to do the business. But I think they do still have ammunition. This perhaps should have happened sooner. Because look at this now. This could be the kicker. What a mixed bag the Isengard player has had. Yeah, they're shaken. They're about to break. One volley. Guards of Orthanc broken and fighting to the death. Defeat seems certain for Isengard. They're going to do it. The defenders are going to win. Look at this. Their army's falling apart, Isengard. Oh dear. It's a disaster of epic proportions is what this is. I think they just ran out of ammunition, so they're not able to finish Isengard off. I mean, it's ironically an incredibly close fight. This is going to come down to a few unit models, I think, even. But for all the wrong reasons, I would suggest. Woodland Protectors, 56 of them, joining the melee. Uruk-hai Pikemen, at this point, their formation is looking a little bit less secure. Well, I mean, there is this guy. Nazkai celebrating. Just one of them left. I would imagine Isengard are going to break, though, based on the... Yeah, look at that. They're gone. They're broken. The defenders are going to win. This one lone Nazkai. I don't know, you know, maybe it wouldn't have made much of a difference. The Nazkai attracting the attention of the Woodland Protectors, but they didn't have that many volleys left, that's the thing. Like, I think the defenders, based on how they played up to that point, probably would have used all their volleys on finishing the Nazkai off, and in that case, maybe the Pikes would have been enough. Either way, it was a... More so than the Dragon Slayers pulling back, that was a dreadful mistake from Isengard. Truly awful. Perhaps the worst one in this error-strewn... I don't want to put the newer players off playing, so I'm not going to rake them over the coals any more than I already have done, to be honest with you. But clearly, I think it was clearly a battle where newer players were very much a factor. Yeah, very very weird fight. I'm not really sure what more to comment on that than I already did. I think the closest we got to a regular fight was on the front with Numenor and Misty Mountains going up against the Dwarven defenders over there. More like what you would see. Harad were able to get into the fortress easier. There is even a case for saying, though, that even the Harad army, like, they took, considering the very poor reactions of Erebor over there, Harad committing their javelins into melee far sooner than they really should have done. That's also another that's a black mark, I have to say. But even so, Harad took too many losses going through there, considering they, you know, normally that kind of performance getting through the Dwarves from Harad would be seen as a victory, but in the situation I would suggest King Ammar should have done slightly better, especially as a more experienced player at the game. Froggy, seen him play many times before, of course. Not much I think he could have done differently, because for some reason the defenders were very keen on keeping Numenor and the Misty Mountains out. Perhaps rightly so, because they do synergise quite well with one another. But yeah, a very, very weird fight this. Let's see what did the damage for Harad at the very least. Champions of Nathrat were sort of right in the mix of things, and they were going up against stuff like Dragon Slayers, so it's perhaps not too surprising that they didn't get as many kills as perhaps you would expect. But in this situation, Demons of the Desert, a lot of those kills were up against stuff like Mithril Guard and Sons of the Fallen as well, so definitely the most key unit for Harad there. Ashari Stalkers doing well for themselves in terms of kills as well, but the rest of their army struggling actually against the quality of the Dwarves. And I think this is a sign perhaps that if you're going up against the Dwarves, the Trollmen for Harad are kind of a must. You're going to gain far more by bringing the Trollmen, and that could have won the attackers the battle, to be honest with you. I feel as though what won the defenders the battle here was a combination of, obviously, the weirdness of the battle as it happened, sort of the new player strangeness, but also the fact that their compositions were actually very good. Like, I think the defenders here, their judgment with picking their armies was actually spot on. Using those armies, I would say there's a lot of room for improvement there. But the same could also be said for several of the attacking players. Isengard in particular, I think. Unfortunately, his mistakes have been brought into sharp relief in this battle, because if he didn't make them, the attackers would have won fairly comfortably. Numenor, I don't think, again, like along with Froggy, I don't think you can actually blame Numenor all that much, because they were definitely focused down. Even Harad, though, in spite of all the ground they made up in the settlement, I'd suggest, considering the situation, they should have done slightly better. But, you know, it is what it is. Big thank you to King Ammar for sending this battle replay to me. Big thanks to all the players for playing in this weird and wonderful battle. Nice to see this settlement again as well. I've only covered this settlement once before, and it's actually a pretty good one as well. I like the hill fort aesthetic, especially if the Dunedain are on the defence, I have to say. I feel as though that's that would be pretty thematic, but as it is, the Dwarves and Elves, through quality, just about able to hold on to the victory here. Coming up, of course, sort of continuing and finishing off really the Bannerlord troop tree overviews, and also next up in terms of Third Age, I think we're going to be moving on to, ironically, the First Age, because I've got another replay for Silmarillion Total War that I want to show, which will probably be the next Total War thing that comes out after this. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.